My name is Dr. Amelia Brooks, and all I ever wanted was to open a small clinic. Not for wealth, not for glory, but because I'd seen too many people turned away from hospitals because they didn't have the money for treatment. I had promised myself that one day I'd build a place where no one would ever hear the words, "Sorry, we can't help you." Before we get into today's story, tell me, where are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments because I always love knowing how far our stories travel. And don't forget to like and subscribe for many more life-changing stories just like this one. Now, let's get into it. Opening a story clinic was a simple dream, at least to me. But to my family, it was the punchline to their jokes. You, a clinic? My oldest brother had laughed so hard one evening that he spilled wine all over the dinner table. Amelia, you can barely keep up with your rent. How on earth do you think you'll run a business? The others joined in, snickering like children. My mother didn't laugh out loud, but the way she shook her head was worse. It was quiet disappointment, like she couldn't believe she had raised a daughter foolish enough to chase such a dream. I tried to be patient with them. I thought maybe they didn't understand how serious I was. Maybe if I explained, if I gave them the numbers, the plan, they would see. So I went to each of my siblings separately. I asked them not for charity, but for investment. Think of it as buying into a company, I said to my younger brother Daniel. The clinic will grow and you'll have shares. I'll do all the work. You just have to believe in me. He scoffed, leaning back in his chair. Amelia, don't embarrass yourself. You're a good doctor, but a terrible businesswoman. I'd be throwing money into a pit. I tried again with my sister Elaine, hoping she would at least consider it. She didn't even let me finish. Amelia, listen to yourself. You sound crazy. Why don't you just accept you're not cut out for this? Stick to your hospital job. It's safer. Leave big dreams to people who actually succeed. Her words stung, not because she rejected me. I kept telling myself it was okay, that maybe I didn't need them. But the truth, it hurt. Because all my life I had thought family was supposed to be your foundation, your place of refuge. And yet, here I was, standing alone with my dream in one hand and their laughter echoing in my ears. And then, something inside me shifted. If they wouldn't help me build it, then I would build it alone, from the ground up, brick by brick, even if it meant burning myself out. But here's the twist. Years later, when my clinic finally rose from nothing, when it grew into a place of hope and patients poured in from all over the city, guess who came back, smiling and pretending they had believed in me all along? My family. They didn't just want to be part of the clinic. They demanded 89% of the shares. I still remember the look on their faces when I opened my briefcase that night at the family table. Their laughter turned to silence. Their pride froze into shock. Because they had no idea what was hidden inside those contracts. When you've been mocked by your own blood, you start to wonder if maybe they're right. For a while, I carried their laughter like a stone in my chest. Every time I tried to sketch out plans for the clinic, I heard Daniel's voice in my head. You'd be throwing money into a pit. Or Elaine's sharp words, stick to your hospital job. Their doubt crawled into me, whispering that maybe I was foolish. Maybe I really was chasing something too big for my hands to hold. But then I remembered the faces of the patients I'd turned away because the hospital rules tied my hands. The mother who begged me to treat her child but had no insurance. The old man who said, "Doctor, I'd rather die at home than leave my grandchildren in debt. I couldn't erase those faces. I couldn't erase their voices. So I told myself, Amelia, you can live with failure, but you can't live with regret. Still, the loneliness was heavy. At family dinners, I sat in silence while my siblings talked about their careers, their investments, their vacations. Not once did they ask about my dream. When they did mention it, it was only to make jokes. Oh, has Amelia bought her little toy hospital yet? Don't worry, sis. If you go bankrupt, I'll hire you as my assistant. They laughed and I forced a smile. But inside, I was breaking. The only person who refused to laugh was Nora. She wasn't family, just a friend I'd met years ago during residency. She was quiet, observant, and one of the very few who believed in me when I spoke about the clinic. One night, after another dinner full of mockery, I met her at a small coffee shop. She leaned across the table, eyes steady. Amelia, why do you let them crush you like this? They're my family, I whispered. If they can't believe in me, maybe it means my dream really is worthless. She shook her head, firm. No, it means they're blind. You're trying to light a fire in the dark, and they're too small to see the spark. But I see it. I believe in you. Those words pierced through the doubt like sunlight breaking clouds. From that day, Nora became my anchor. She didn't have money to invest, but she gave me something more precious: belief. Whenever my family tried to drag me down, she reminded me, they won't see you now, but they'll see you later. Her faith kept me moving, one step at a time. And then came the breaking point. I realised one truth, a truth so sharp it felt like a blade in my chest. If I kept waiting for my family to see me, I'd die waiting. They weren't going to help. They weren't going to encourage me. And the more I begged for their approval, the more I gave them power to bury me. I had no choice. If I wanted this dream, I would have to carry it alone. No helping hands, no guiding voices, just me, my will, and the faint hope that somewhere on the other side of pain there would be light. So I stood in front of the half-empty apartment I called home, staring at the stacks of papers on my desk, the business plan, the sketches of the clinic, the budget I could barely meet. It was terrifying, the kind of fear that makes your knees shake and your stomach twist. But beneath the fear, there was also a strange kind of freedom. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for anyone. And that night, I whispered to myself, then I'll build it alone. Starting alone sounds brave in stories, but in real life, it's terrifying. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise, threw on my white coat and ran to my shift at the hospital. I picked up extra hours wherever I could. Weekends, night shifts, even holidays. My friends teased me, saying I lived in the hospital more than my apartment, but they didn't know the truth. Every extra dollar I made was carefully tucked away into my clinic fund. That fund was my lifeline, my secret treasure chest. And to keep feeding it, I had to bleed myself dry. I stopped buying new clothes. The fancy shoes I used to wear to family dinners, sold them. The small gold bracelet my grandmother had given me, pawned. I traded expensive meals for instant noodles and skipped taxis to walk miles, even in the rain. Sometimes when I stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 3 a.m, eyes hollow, hands trembling from exhaustion, I wondered if I was losing my mind. But then I thought about the people waiting for help, the children, the sick, the elderly with no insurance. And I told myself, if you don't fight for them, Amelia, who will? My family noticed the changes, of course, but not in the way I hoped. Instead of asking if I was okay, They turned my sacrifices into another punchline. "Look at Amelia," my sister Elaine would say at gatherings. "She dresses like a college student now. I bet she's saving for her imaginary hospital again." My brothers would laugh, nudging each other. "Careful, she might ask you to invest in her little dream again. Better hide your wallet." The words cut, but I stayed quiet. If I opened my mouth, I was sure my voice would crack. The only one who ever asked if I was eating well was Nora. She'd show up at my apartment some nights with a bag of groceries. "You can't run on fumes forever," she'd scold gently, setting a warm meal on my counter. I'd smile, though my eyes burned. "I'll be fine. I have to be." "You're not fine, Amelia. You're barely holding yourself together." Maybe she was right. But what choice did I have? If I didn't sacrifice, if I didn't fight, then the clinic would never exist. Months passed and slowly, painfully, the clinic fund began to grow. Every number I added to that savings account was like a drop of water in a desert. And for the first time in years, I felt hope flicker inside me. But hope has a cruel way of being tested. One cold evening, my phone rang. It was the landlord of my tiny apartment. My rent had spiked suddenly, and I was already behind. On top of that, a hospital billing error landed me with a fine I didn't deserve but couldn't fight in time. In a single week, nearly everything I had saved, months of sweat, sleepless nights and sacrifices, was gone. Just like that. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the balance on my phone. My chest felt hollow, like the air had been sucked out of me. I had clawed my way up inch by inch, only to be thrown right back into the pit. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered to myself, maybe they were right. Maybe I am chasing something impossible. The laughter of my family echoed in my head, cruel and sharp, and for the first time, I felt the dangerous pull of giving up. Losing my savings felt like watching the foundation of my dream crumble beneath me. For 3 days, I barely spoke. I went through the motions at the hospital, plastering on a professional smile, while inside I was drowning. My co-workers noticed the dark circles under my eyes, the way my hands shook when I signed charts, but no one asked questions. At night, when I came home to my empty apartment, I sat in the dark staring at the blank wall. "What's the point, Amelia?" the voice inside me whispered. "Why keep trying when life keeps tearing everything away?" But giving up wasn't an option, not after everything I had already endured. So I wiped my tears, tightened my jaw and whispered into the silence. If I have to start from nothing again, then I will. The next weeks became a blur of work. I doubled my hospital shifts, days bled into nights and nights into mornings. My body ached constantly, but I pushed it aside. On weekends, I picked up private consultations for patients who couldn't afford big hospitals but were desperate for care. They paid what they could, sometimes money, sometimes groceries, and I accepted every bit of it. I cut every corner in my life. No more cafes, no more occasional movie nights, no more small indulgences. Even the heat in my apartment stayed off some nights, and I curled up in blankets, teeth chattering. Every penny went back into the clinic fund. Nora was the only one who saw the toll it was taking. "You're killing yourself," she said one evening when she found me asleep at my desk, still in scrubs, with an unfinished sandwich beside me. I rubbed my eyes, forcing a smile. "I'm fine. I just need a little more time, a little more money. Once I get a loan, I'll finally have enough." She shook her head, eyes full of worry. "Amelia, you can't carry the world on your shoulders forever." "I have to," I whispered. "No one else will carry it for me." Months later, against all odds, I had scraped together enough to take the next step. It wasn't much, but it was enough for a down payment on a tiny piece of land on the edge of the city, a place where my clinic could finally rise. My hands trembled as I signed the initial paperwork. For the first time in years, I felt like I was moving forward. But then the rejections began. I went to bank after bank, sitting across polished desks, explaining my vision with as much passion as I could muster. I showed them the numbers, the plans, the projected revenue. I poured out my heart, begging them to see what I saw. Each time the loan officer would give me the same practiced smile. "I'm sorry, Dr. Brooks, at this time your application does not meet our criteria." I asked why, but their answers were always vague: high risk, insufficient collateral, not the right time. It didn't make sense. My credit was good, my income stable. By the fifth rejection, frustration clawed at me. Something wasn't right. Late one evening, after yet another denial, I walked home in the drizzle, my shoes soaked through. I stopped under a flickering streetlight, clutching the rejected paperwork against my chest. And in that moment, a chilling thought slipped into my mind. What if someone doesn't want me to succeed? I swallowed hard, rain dripping down my face. The dream I was killing myself for was slipping further away, and I couldn't shake the fear that invisible hands were pulling strings to keep me down. For weeks, the rejections piled up. Each time I walked into a bank, I carried a spark of hope in my chest, and each time I walked out, I carried ashes instead. The words were always polite, always professional, but they all meant the same thing: no. One rejection could be coincidence. 2, maybe bad timing. But 5? 6? Something didn't add up. One night, I sat across from Nora in our usual cafe, my hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. "They're shutting me out," I said, my voice low, like admitting it too loudly would make it more real. "Maybe it's just the economy," Nora offered gently, but I saw the doubt flicker in her eyes. "No," I shook my head. "It feels deliberate, like someone slamming the doors before I even knock." She leaned forward. "Amelia, who would want to stop you from building a clinic? That doesn't make sense." But it did make sense. Too much sense. The answer had been sitting in the back of my mind, and the longer I ignored it, the heavier it became. A week later, I found out the truth. I had gone to yet another meeting with a loan officer, determined to try one more time. He flipped through my paperwork, his expression stiff, then leaned closer. "Dr. Brooks, off the record," he hesitated, glancing around the room, "there's been commentary about your project. Negative commentary. It's made some institutions cautious about lending to you." I frowned. "Commentary? From who?" He cleared his throat. "I can't say names, but from someone in your circle, someone close." The room seemed to tilt beneath me. My fingers went cold against the edge of my chair. Someone close. Someone close enough to poison my reputation before I even got a chance. That evening, Nora sat with me in my apartment while I paced the floor. "It's them," I whispered, my voice breaking. "It has to be one of them." "You mean your family?" I stopped pacing. My mind replayed every mocking laugh, every cruel word, every moment they had dismissed me. I thought of Daniel, smug and certain I'd fail. "Yes," I said finally, my jaw tightening. "It's Daniel. It has to be." I didn't want to believe it, but the proof came faster than I expected. A few days later, I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. I had gone to my parents' house, hoping maybe, just maybe, I could appeal to them, show them that I was serious, that all I needed was a chance. But as I walked up the steps, I froze at the sound of voices drifting through the half-open window. Daniel's voice. "Don't worry, I've already made some calls. No bank in the city will touch her. She'll burn out, and when she does, she'll have no choice but to come crawling back." My breath caught in my throat. He wasn't just mocking me anymore, he was actively destroying me. I stood there, my heart pounding, my hands shaking so hard I thought I might drop the folder of documents I was holding. I wanted to burst inside, scream at him, demand to know how he could betray me like this. But I didn't. Instead, I backed away slowly, my chest tight, my throat burning with unshed tears. Because in that moment, I realised something far worse than betrayal. Daniel wasn't just my brother. He was my enemy. There's a unique kind of pain that comes when betrayal wears the face of family. I couldn't get Daniel's words out of my head. No bank in the city will touch her. She'll burn out, and when she does, she'll have no choice but to come crawling back. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my chest tight with rage and heartbreak. It wasn't enough that they mocked me. Now they wanted to make sure I failed. The next Sunday, I did something I'd avoided for months. I went to the family dinner. The house smelled of roasted chicken and spice, laughter spilling from the dining room before I even stepped inside. My siblings were already there, wine glasses raised, the picture of comfort and confidence. When I walked in, their smiles faltered. "Well, well," Elaine said, setting her glass down with exaggerated surprise. "Look who decided to show up. Should we clap for the future business tycoon?" My brothers chuckled. Even my parents glanced at each other, as though my presence was a joke they had long outgrown. But I didn't sit. I didn't smile. I stood tall, clutching the chair in front of me. "I know what you've been doing." The room went silent. Daniel tilted his head, feigning innocence. "What exactly have I been doing, little sister?" I swallowed hard, my voice shaking but clear. "You've been blocking me. You've been making calls, poisoning my chances before I even walk in the door." He leaned back in his chair, lips curling. "And what if I have? I'm protecting you from making a fool of yourself. You should thank me." The others laughed, softly, cruelly, as if his betrayal was a kindness. Something in me snapped. "Do you have any idea what I've given up for this?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "Do you know the hours I've worked, the nights I've gone without food, the things I've sold just to keep this dream alive? And for what? For my own family to spit on me?" My father's hand came down on the table. "Enough, Amelia. You're embarrassing yourself. Sit down and stop talking nonsense." But I couldn't stop. Years of swallowed pain were rushing out all at once. "I came to you for help, not handouts, not pity, investment, partnership. And all you've done is laugh, sabotage, and tear me down. What kind of family does that?" For a moment, silence. Then Daniel chuckled. A slow, cruel sound. The kind of family that knows when to stop chasing fairy tales. Laughter followed. My siblings, my parents, all laughing like my pain was the punchline to a cruel joke. That night, I left their house with their laughter ringing in my ears. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the weight of their scorn pressed down on my chest. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I worked through the following days like a ghost, moving from patient to patient, chart to chart, barely holding myself together. And then, one evening at the hospital, as I was walking out after a 14-hour shift, my vision blurred. My knees buckled. The hallway spun around me. The last thing I remembered was the sound of a nurse screaming my name as I hit the cold tile floor. When I woke up, it wasn't in my apartment. It wasn't even in the hospital wing I worked in. It was in a bed. My body weak, my chest aching, an IV dripping beside me, and the sight of Nora's worried face leaning over mine. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the first sound I heard when I woke. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. My body felt heavy, like I'd been buried under stone. Then I saw Nora. She sat slouched in the chair beside my bed, her eyes ringed with exhaustion, a half-empty coffee cup in her hands. When she noticed me stirring, she shot up, relief flooding her face. "Amelia," she whispered, grabbing my hand. "Thank God. You scared me half to death." I tried to sit up, but pain rushed through my chest, forcing me back down. My throat was dry when I asked, "How long have I been here?" 2 days, Nora said softly. 2 days, Amelia. You collapsed from exhaustion. The doctors said you've been running on fumes for too long." Her voice cracked at the edges. I'd never seen her cry before, but her eyes glistened now. Shame pressed against my ribs. I'd worked so hard to prove my strength, only to end up here, weak, broken, hooked to machines. Maybe my family was right. Maybe I was chasing something that was never meant for me. I turned my face away, whispering, maybe I should stop. Maybe I should let it go. Nora's grip tightened on my hand. Her voice was fierce, trembling with emotion. No, Amelia, you don't stop. Do you hear me? You don't stop. You've carried this dream alone when no one else would. You've sacrificed everything. That makes you stronger than any of them, not weaker. Tears spilled down my cheeks. But what if I can't do it anymore? She leaned closer, her voice steady as steel. Then you let me remind you who you are. You're Amelia Brooks. You've already survived more than most people ever could. You don't give up now, not when you've come this far. Her words pierced through the fog of despair, igniting a tiny flame inside me. A fragile flame, but it was enough. I closed my eyes, breathing deeply. For the first time in months, I felt something other than exhaustion. I felt resolve. When I was discharged a few days later, Nora walked me out of the hospital. The world felt different, brighter, sharper, as though I'd been given a second chance. I promised myself right there on the steps, I'll rise. Even if it kills me, I'll rise. And then, just when I thought the universe had no mercy left for me, something unexpected happened. I had been speaking to a small group at a community hall, sharing my struggles in hopes of finding local support. It wasn't a pitch for money, just a plea for understanding. I told them about the dream, about the clinic, about how I wanted to create a place where no one would be turned away. When I finished, there was silence. I thought maybe I'd failed again. Then a man in his 60s stood up. His clothes were modest, his eyes kind. He introduced himself as Mr. Jacobs. My wife would be alive today, he said softly, if someone like you had been there for her when we couldn't afford treatment. People like you are the reason this world still has hope. Before I could respond, he walked up and pressed an envelope into my hands. Take this, he said. It isn't charity. It's an investment in someone who refuses to give up. I opened it later that night. Inside was a cheque, a sum so large it made my knees buckle. Enough to restart construction. Enough to breathe life into my dream again. I stared at the numbers through blurred vision, my heart pounding in disbelief. For the first time in years, it felt like the tide had turned. The cheque from Mr. Jacobs felt like a miracle in my hands. For weeks, I kept staring at the numbers, half afraid the ink would fade, half afraid I'd wake up and realise it was just a dream. But it was real, and with it, I finally had the seed I needed to plant my vision. When I was discharged a few days later, Nora walked me out of the hospital. The world felt different, brighter, sharper, as though I'd been given a second chance. I promised myself right there on the steps, I'll rise. Even if it kills me, I'll rise. And then, just when I thought the universe had no mercy left for me, something unexpected happened. I had been speaking to a small group at a community hall, sharing my struggles in hopes of finding local support. It wasn't a pitch for money, just a plea for understanding. I told them about the dream, about the clinic, about how I wanted to create a place where no one would be turned away. When I finished, there was silence. I thought maybe I'd failed again. Then a man in his 60s stood up. His clothes were modest, his eyes kind. He introduced himself as Mr. Jacobs. My wife would be alive today, he said softly, if someone like you had been there for her when we couldn't afford treatment. People like you are the reason this world still has hope. Before I could respond, he walked up and pressed an envelope into my hands. Take this, he said. It isn't charity. It's an investment in someone who refuses to give up. I opened it later that night. Inside was a cheque, a sum so large it made my knees buckle. Enough to restart construction. Enough to breathe life into my dream again. I stared at the numbers through blurred vision, my heart pounding in disbelief. For the first time in years, it felt like the tide had turned. The cheque from Mr. Jacobs felt like a miracle in my hands. For weeks, I kept staring at the numbers, half afraid the ink would fade, half afraid I'd wake up and realise it was just a dream. But it was real, and with it, I finally had the seed I needed to plant my vision. The land I had managed to secure months ago was nothing more than a patch of dirt on the edge of the city. But when I stood there with the contract in one hand and Mr. Jacobs' donation in the other, I didn't see dirt. I saw walls, beds, smiling nurses, children running through the halls. I saw hope. Construction began slowly. Nothing fancy, just a modest building with a handful of rooms, donated equipment and second-hand furniture. I bargained for everything, cut corners where I could, and still, every brick that went up felt like a victory. When the day finally came to open the doors, my heart raced like I was about to step onto a battlefield. The sign above the entrance read, Brooks Community Clinic. It wasn't large, it wasn't shiny, but it was mine. The first week was quiet. Too quiet. I sat at the reception desk in the evenings, flipping through files that were still mostly empty. Sometimes a patient would wander in, a mother with a sick child, a man with a wound he couldn't afford to treat at the hospital. I gave them my full attention, treated them with care, and often waved away the money they tried to press into my hand. It wasn't about profit. It was about trust. Still, as the days dragged on, doubt whispered in my ear. What if no one comes? What if you built this place for nothing? Then one evening, everything changed. A young woman burst through the doors, her face pale with panic. In her arms was a little boy, limp and gasping for air. "Please," she cried, tears streaking down her face. "He's not breathing right. They told me the hospital wouldn't take him without insurance. Please, help him." I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the boy, laid him on the examination bed and went to work. His tiny chest rose and fell in ragged bursts. Every second felt like an eternity. "Stay with me," I whispered, my hands moving swiftly, my training taking over. Nora, who had been visiting that night, rushed to hand me supplies. Together, we fought for that child's life. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Sweat dripped down my temples. The mother's sobs echoed in the room. And then, finally, the boy coughed. A weak, fragile sound, but it was enough. His chest steadied. His eyes fluttered open. Relief hit me like a wave, and the mother collapsed to her knees, sobbing into her hands. "You saved him," she whispered. "You saved my baby." What I didn't know was that someone had recorded the entire moment on their phone. By morning, the video was everywhere, shared across social media, splashed on local news stations, retweeted with captions like, "The doctor who saved a child when the hospital refused him." Within days, people started pouring into the clinic. Donations trickled in, then flooded. Reporters knocked on my door. Patients travelled across the city, some even from neighbouring towns, just to see the clinic that had given a dying boy another chance. Standing at the entrance one morning, watching a line of patients stretch down the street, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not just hope, vindication. It's strange how fast life can change. One week, I was sitting alone at the clinic's front desk, praying for someone, anyone, to walk through the doors. The next, I couldn't keep up with the flood of patients. Everywhere I turned, there were people waiting. Mothers holding children, old men with tired eyes, families clutching hope in their hands. The video of me saving that little boy had lit a fire across the city. People called me the doctor who cared, the one who refused to turn anyone away. My phone buzzed non-stop with interview requests. Donations rolled in, checks, envelopes of cash, even boxes of medical supplies left at the doorstep. With the surge of support, I was able to expand. We added more rooms, new equipment, and even hired 2 part-time nurses. Nora helped me manage the chaos, working behind the desk with a smile that never seemed to fade, even when the waiting room overflowed. Every evening, when I finally collapsed into my chair after hours of non-stop work, I would look around the clinic and feel my heart swell. It wasn't just a building anymore, it was alive. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from their mockery, free from their shadow. My family had told me I couldn't do this, but here I was, proving them wrong every single day. Still, success came with storms of its own. The bigger the clinic grew, the more weight sat on my shoulders. I worked longer hours than ever, often skipping meals, often collapsing into bed too tired to change out of my scrubs. But this exhaustion felt different from before. This was not the exhaustion of fighting alone. It was the exhaustion of purpose, and that I could live with. One evening, as I was locking up, Nora nudged me with a grin. "Do you realize what you've done?" she said. I smiled faintly. "What do you mean?" "You've built something no one thought possible. Amelia, this place isn't just a clinic. It's a beacon. People believe in you now. They finally see you." Her words warmed me. For years, I had begged for recognition from the people closest to me, only to be laughed at. And now, strangers, people who owed me nothing, were giving me the respect and gratitude I had longed for. But the past has a way of circling back when you least expect it. One Saturday morning, the clinic was buzzing as usual. The waiting room was full, patients lined the halls, and the hum of voices filled the air. I stepped into the reception area to check on things and froze. Standing by the door, dressed in their finest clothes, were my parents, and behind them, Daniel, Elaine, and the rest of my siblings. For a moment, the world seemed to blur. They were smiling as if they had been part of this from the beginning. "Amelia," my mother said warmly, stepping forward as if nothing had ever happened. "We've come to see your wonderful clinic. We always knew you had it in you." The words struck me like ice. Always knew? After all the laughter, the rejection, the sabotage. Daniel extended his hand, his smile dripping with false pride. "We're proud of you, little sister. Really proud." I stood frozen, the noise of the clinic fading around me. They weren't here for me. They were here for what I had built. And in that moment, I knew. The storm was only just beginning. At first, I didn't know how to react. My family stood in the middle of my clinic, smiling as though the years of insults and betrayal had never happened. They shook hands with patients, complimented the decor, and even posed for pictures with the nurses. But beneath the polished smiles, I saw the truth. Their eyes weren't on me. They were on the clinic, the walls, the patients, the donations. They weren't proud of me. They were proud of what they thought they could take. Over the following weeks, they kept showing up. Elaine dropped by with flowers, insisting she wanted to support her brilliant sister. Daniel slapped me on the back, calling me a business genius. Even my parents began telling neighbours how proud they were of their daughter, the doctor who built a clinic from scratch. To anyone else, it looked like a picture-perfect family finally coming together. But I knew better. Their warmth was hollow. Their words were rehearsed. And yet, I stayed silent. Why? Maybe because a small part of me still wanted their approval. Maybe because after so many years of rejection, it felt easier to play along than to open old wounds. Then came the dinner invitation. My parents wanted us all together again, to celebrate Amelia's success. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The dining room was just as I remembered. Polished wood, the long table gleaming under the chandelier, plates set with perfect precision. Everyone was there, dressed in their finest. For a while, the conversation was light. My siblings toasted my clinic. My father complimented the family legacy I was building, though I had built it alone. But then Daniel cleared his throat. "Amelia," he said, leaning forward, his voice smooth, "we've been talking, and we think it's time to take your clinic to the next level." I frowned. "The next level?" "Yes," Elaine chimed in. "You've done well, but you need real management now. A family-run board. People who can handle the finances, the partnerships, the growth. You can focus on being a doctor. Leave the business to us." My stomach twisted. "Leave the business to you?" My mother smiled kindly as though offering me a gift. "You've worked so hard, dear. Let us carry the load now. We only want what's best for you." Then Daniel slid a folder across the table. I opened it and my heart dropped. A contract. Carefully written, neatly typed. They weren't just offering to help. They were demanding control. 89% of the shares, leaving me, the founder, the dreamer, the fighter who had sacrificed everything, with only 11%. I looked up, stunned. 89%? Are you insane? Elaine sighed as though I was being unreasonable. "Amelia, be practical. You wouldn't even have this clinic without us." My hands shook. "Without you? You mocked me. You turned me down. You blocked me." Daniel's smile didn't falter. "And yet, here you are. You should be grateful we're willing to step in now. Think of it as repayment, family loyalty." The room spun. Their faces blurred into masks of greed, each one waiting for me to sign away everything I had bled for. I clenched the pen they had set beside me, my chest tight, my mind racing. 89%. They were trying to steal my life's work in broad daylight. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. For a long moment, I just stared at the papers Daniel slid across the table. 89%. The number blazed at me, bold and unapologetic. My family sat there smugly, wine glasses in hand, waiting for me to crumble. "Amelia," my father said with rehearsed gentleness, "don't make this harder than it needs to be. You've done your part. Now let us manage things properly." "Properly?" I whispered, my chest tightening. "You weren't there when I built this. You weren't there when I nearly lost everything. And now you want to strip me down to nothing?" Daniel leaned in, his smile sharp as glass. "You'll thank us later. Without us, you'll never grow. With us, this place becomes an empire." I shoved the folder back. "No." The air snapped with tension. Daniel's grin hardened. He lowered his voice, his words dripping poison. "You think you're untouchable? Fame fades, Amelia. One story, one whisper, and your reputation is gone. I can make that happen." My stomach nodded. He wasn't bluffing. My family had always known where my weaknesses lay, and they weren't above twisting them into weapons. "You wouldn't dare," I said, my voice tight. Daniel smirked. "Oh, I would. Unless you cooperate." Elaine pushed the pen toward me, her tone sugar-sweet. "Come on, Amelia. Don't fight us. Sign it. Make this easy." I froze. For a moment, I wanted to scream, to flip the table, to tell them they would never own me. But instead, I inhaled slowly and my mind sharpened. If they wanted control so badly, let them think they had it. Let them think I was defeated. "Fine," I said at last, my voice flat. "I'll have the lawyers clean this up so there are no mistakes. I'll sign then." Daniel's smirk widened. Smart choice. What they didn't know was that cleaning it up meant rewriting it entirely. That night, I sat at my desk, Nora beside me, drafting new agreements. The structure looked official. The language was convincing. and buried inside were the clauses that flipped everything on its head. Instead of giving them 89% ownership, the contracts bound them as financial guarantors. In plain words, they weren't taking from the clinic. They were required to pour money into it, indefinitely. They wanted to exploit me. Instead, they signed themselves into servitude. I printed the contracts, neat and precise. And days later, blinded by arrogance, my family signed without hesitation. As they toasted their victory, I sat back in silence, hiding the faintest smile, because they thought I had surrendered. But in truth, I had just set the trap. The days that followed were surreal. Daniel strutted around the clinic as though he were king, barking orders, acting as if the staff were his. Elaine played the part of the charming co-founder, telling donors she had always believed in me. My parents soaked up the spotlight, smiling for photos and shaking hands. They thought they owned me. They thought they had won. But I stayed quiet. I let them have their parade, because parades always end. One night, Nora found me reviewing the signed documents in my office. "You're awfully calm," she said, her brows furrowed. "They think they own your clinic. Why aren't you furious?" I tapped the papers with my pen, the faintest smile tugging at my lips. "Because they signed exactly what I wanted them to," I whispered. Her eyes widened. "Amelia, what did you do?" I leaned back in my chair. They wanted ownership? I gave them paper. But those papers make them funders, not rulers. They've legally tied themselves to financing this clinic for as long as it exists, and they don't even know it yet. Nora's mouth fell open. Then slowly a grin spread across her face. "You brilliant, stubborn genius." When my family announced a press conference to unveil the new leadership of Brooks Community Clinic, I didn't argue. Daniel called me the night before, smug as ever. "Be there tomorrow, Amelia. It'll be the start of our new empire." I hung up without a word. Because he was right. Tomorrow would be the start of something new. Just not for them. The hall was packed the next day. Cameras flashed, reporters murmured, and donors filled the seats. My family sat on stage, polished and proud, ready to bask in stolen glory. Daniel stood first, his voice booming. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we celebrate a new era for Brooks Community Clinic, one that will carry the Brooks family legacy to greatness." Applause thundered. Elaine rose next. "This clinic has always been about family, about unity. We are proud to say we now stand together, leading it forward." More applause. And then all eyes turned to me. I stepped up to the podium, contracts in hand, my pulse steady. "Before we continue," I said, my voice cutting through the noise, "there's something you all deserve to know about these agreements." The hall was still buzzing with applause when I stepped up to the podium. I held the signed agreements in my hand, papers my family thought were their ticket to power, papers they had signed without so much as glancing at the fine print. "Before we continue," I began, my voice clear and steady, "I need to make something very clear about these agreements my family has been boasting about." The room hushed. Reporters leaned forward, pens poised. My family shifted uneasily in their chairs. "These contracts do not give ownership of Brooks Community Clinic," I said. "They never did." Gasps rippled through the audience. Daniel shot upright in his seat. "That's a lie." I raised a hand, silencing him. "No, Daniel, it's not. These contracts were drafted by me, and every one of you," I turned to face my family, "signed them without reading." Cameras flashed furiously. Reporters shouted questions. I held the papers higher. What you signed were royalty clauses. They make you financial guarantors of this clinic, which means instead of taking 89% of my work, you are legally bound to fund it, to put your own money into its operations, permanently. The crowd erupted. Donors gasped. A murmur of shock rippled through the hall like a wave. Elaine's face went pale, her glass of water slipping from her hand and shattering on the floor. Daniel lunged forward, his voice desperate. "This is fraud. You tricked us." I turned to him slowly, my voice cutting like ice. "No, Daniel. Fraud would be if I stole from you. I didn't steal anything. You signed the contracts willingly because you were too arrogant to read them. You wanted to exploit me. Instead, you tied yourselves to my vision." Reporters scribbled furiously. Flashbulbs lit up the stage. My father stood, his face red with fury. "We are your family. You cannot humiliate us like this." I met his gaze, my throat burning but my voice steady. "Family supports. Family protects. You did neither. You mocked me when I begged for help. You sabotaged me when I tried to rise. And when I finally succeeded, you tried to steal it all. That is not family. That is betrayal." The silence that followed was deafening. One reporter shouted over the chaos, "Dr. Brooks, is it true your family refused to help you in the beginning?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "They mocked me. They dismissed me. And when I went to them for investment, each one turned me away. My clinic exists not because of their support, but in spite of their cruelty." The hall buzzed with whispers. Cameras flashed faster. Behind me, my family sat frozen in disbelief. Daniel's smugness had vanished, replaced with raw panic. Elaine looked as if she might faint. My parents avoided the cameras altogether, their faces ashen. They had come expecting applause. Instead, they were exposed as greedy opportunists, bound by their own signatures to fund the very dream they tried to kill. And as I looked out over the sea of faces, I realised something powerful. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being mocked. They were. The press conference ended in chaos. Reporters swarmed the stage, their cameras flashing like lightning. Questions flew from every direction, but I didn't stay to answer them. I walked off with my head held high, Nora close behind me. Behind us, my family sat frozen, their pride shattered, their reputations unravelling in front of the city. For years they had mocked me in private. Now their betrayal was public knowledge. In the days that followed, the fallout was brutal. Headlines painted them as opportunists. Family betrays doctor who built clinic alone. The Brooks clan's greed exposed. Donors who once shook their hands now ignored them. Friends stopped returning their calls. For the first time, my family felt what it was like to be dismissed, laughed at, abandoned. And yet, they still came to me. One evening, Elaine showed up at my clinic. Her makeup was smudged, her usual confidence gone. "Amelia, please," she begged, her voice trembling. "You humiliated us. The whole city is laughing. Can't we fix this?" I looked at her, memories flooding back. Her laughter when I begged her to believe in me. Her smug smile when she called me crazy. "Fix this," I said coldly. "The only thing broken was the bond you destroyed years ago, and I won't rebuild it for you." Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, she looked small. "We're still your family." I turned away. "No. You stopped being family the moment you tried to steal my life's work." The next day, Daniel cornered me in the parking lot. His arrogance was gone, replaced with fury. "You think you've won?" he spat. "This isn't over. You can't just cut us off. We're blood, Amelia. Blood doesn't break." I met his glare with steady eyes. Blood may tie us, but loyalty is what makes a family. and you showed me you have none." He had no comeback. For once, Daniel walked away without a smirk. But not everyone came with rage. My youngest sibling, Sarah, came quietly one night after the clinic had closed. She sat across from me, her hands shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have believed in you. I should have stood up for you. You carried us for years and I followed the others. I was a coward." Her words broke something in me. For years I had longed for just one of them to see me, not as the failure they mocked, but as the sister who had fought with everything she had. Tears filled my eyes as I whispered, "I don't hate you, Sarah, but I can't go back. Not anymore." She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I understand. I just needed you to know I was wrong." That night I stood in my office, looking at the city skyline. Nora joined me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "You've proven yourself," she said softly. "You don't owe them anything anymore." She was right. I had spent my entire life begging my family to see me, to value me. And in doing so, I had chained myself to their cruelty. But not anymore. The next week, I called another press conference. When the cameras turned on me, I spoke with a steady voice. "I need to make one final thing clear. The Brooks Community Clinic will never again be tied to the greed of those who sought to exploit it. My family has no place here, not in leadership, not in legacy. I have cut all ties with them, permanently. This clinic belongs to the people, not to those who tried to destroy it." The room erupted in applause, and in that moment, I felt lighter than I ever had in my life. The weeks after my announcement were unlike anything I had ever known. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder, waiting for my family's laughter, their sabotage, or their scorn. For the first time, I was free. And freedom tasted sweeter than I could have imagined. The clinic became a symbol of resilience. Patients poured in from across the city, then from neighbouring towns. Donations continued to flow, not because of pity, but because people believed in what we were building. With those funds, I expanded again, adding new wings, hiring more staff, creating specialised departments for children, the elderly, and those suffering from chronic illnesses. Brooks Community Clinic wasn't just a modest building anymore. It was becoming a network, a lifeline. Reporters came often, asking about my story. Some wanted to focus on the betrayal, the family drama, but I steered every conversation back to the patients, the mission, the hope. Because this clinic was never about revenge. It was about healing. Still, I couldn't ignore what my triumph had done. My family, once so proud and loud, had gone quiet. Their names carried shame now, not prestige. Invitations stopped arriving at their doors. Business partners pulled away. They had been exposed and the city had judged them. And I had risen above them, just as I had always promised myself I would. One afternoon, as I walked through the new paediatric wing, Nora caught up to me, her eyes sparkling. "Do you realise what you've done?" she asked. I chuckled softly. "Built a clinic?" She shook her head. "More than that. You proved them wrong. You proved everyone wrong, Amelia. You turned their laughter into your victory." Her words warmed me. For years I had longed for my family's validation. Now I realised I never needed it. What I needed was my own belief, and Nora's steady faith had carried me when mine faltered. But the world has a way of reminding you how far you've come. Months later, I stood on a stage at a city gala, receiving an award for outstanding service to the community. The room was filled with leaders, doctors, and philanthropists. Cameras flashed as I held the plaque in my hands. From the corner of the room, I caught sight of them. My family. They weren't at the centre anymore. They weren't clinking glasses or smiling for photographers. They stood at the back, silent, their faces tight, their pride buried under disgrace. For a fleeting moment, our eyes met. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel triumph over them. I felt nothing at all. Because they no longer held power over me. When it was my turn to speak, I walked up to the microphone, the hall quieting around me. I built this clinic because I believed no one should be turned away from care, I said. But along the way, I learned another lesson. Sometimes the people who should lift you up will be the ones who try to break you. And when that happens, you have a choice: to give in or to rise anyway. The audience leaned in, listening. I chose to rise, and today I dedicate this award not to myself, but to everyone who has ever been told their dream was impossible. Keep fighting. Keep building. Your success will speak louder than their laughter ever did. The room erupted in applause. As I stepped off the stage, Nora embraced me, whispering, "You did it." And for the first time in my life, I truly believed it. Because I hadn't just built a clinic, I had built a life, a future, a legacy. One that belonged not to the family who mocked me, but to the people who believed in me, and to myself.